Why is Goblin Piledriver never sad? Because he has protection from the blues.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features Maxim bringing back his Braids deck. He wants to sacrifice some permanents, draw some cards, and cause a world of hurt for his opponents. He keeps 3 Swamps, Myriad Landscape, Night's Whisper, Bastion of Remembrance, and Defile. I'm still testing out my spell-singing Dihada, keeping a Twinning Staff, a Marsh Flats, Caves of Koilos, Godless Shrine, By Force, Soul Ring, and Rakdos Signet. Felix has been having a great time with his Cadric deck, making lots of token copies of legendary spells. He keeps 2 Mountains, Temple of Triumph, Battlefield Forge, Esper Sentinel, Helm of the Host, and Determined Iteration. Seb has decided to dig up the past, bringing Wilhelt with him and his zombie horde. He keeps 2 Swamps, Reanimate, Urborg, Wayfarer's Bauble, Dimir Signet, and a Gleaming Overseer. Maxim wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a tap Myriad Landscape. My turn is quick as I follow suit, playing a tapped Godless Shrine. Felix also has a tap land with a Temple of Triumph, and he scries 1 as it comes in, keeping it on top. Seb is the only one not to have a tap land, playing Urborg instead, and tapping it for 1 black to cast a Wayfarer's Bauble. Maxim has a Swamp for turn, and pays 2 to cast a Night's Whisper, which has him losing 2 and drawing 2. He then has to discard down to 7 and passes to me. I've got a Cave of Koilos for turn, and I tap my 2 mana to cast a Rakdos Signet. Felix plays out a Battlefield Forge, tapping it and losing 1 for a white to cast Yoshimaru. He then taps the temple for another white, dropping his Esper Sentinel, and with all of his white 1-drops having resolved, passes to Seb. Seb draws and plays a Swamp. He then taps out to crack the Bauble, and goes into his library to find an island. Maxim plays a Swamp, and then pays 3 mana, casting Bastion of Remembrance that he'd had in his opening hand. He can't pay the 1 to the Sentinel, and Felix gets to draw a card. The Bastion then enters, and makes him a human token, and he passes to me. My turn has a Marsh Flats coming in, and I can tap it for mana thanks to Urborg on Seb's side, which lets me tap out for Dihada. I then downtick her, revealing and binning my top 4 cards. None of them are legendary, so this makes me 4 treasure tokens, and I pass after that. Felix has a Mountain for turn, and taps 2 mana for a Felwar Stone. He then taps 2 more mana, casting Determined Iteration, and passes after that. Seb's got a Swamp, and casts a Dimir Signet. He taps enough once that resolves for a Gleaming Overseer, and gets a Zombie Army token, which comes in with a +1/+1 counter. He passes after that. Maxim plays a Swamp, and casts Braids in his main phase. He then passes through his steps, going to his end of turn and getting a Braids trigger. This lets him sacrifice the human token, which drains each of his opponents for 1 from the Bastion trigger. I can't, and Felix and Seb don't want to sacrifice a creature, so we each lose 2, and Maxim then draws 3 cards. He then has to discard down to hand size, which lets him discard a Reassembling Skeleton. I've got an Arid Mesa for turn, and then uptick Dihada after making a deal with Felix to put her ability onto Yoshimaru as long as he doesn't attack me until my next turn. He agrees, and I then cast a Twinning Staff. This lets Felix draw from the Sentinel trigger, and I pass after that. Felix plays a Plains for turn, and then taps enough in his main phase for Cadric, which, as it enters, gives Yoshimaru a +1/+1 counter. He then goes to combat, and swings the legendary Pupper at max, dealing some damage and gaining some life. With nothing else, he passes to Seb. Seb casts a Crowded Crypt in his main phase, and then drops his first Lord with a Lord of the Undead. Going to combat, the Zombie Army and Gleaming Overseer go at Dihada to take her out. With nothing else, he passes turn. Maxim plays a Swamp for turn, and then taps 2 to sacrifice the Myriad Landscape, going to find 2 tapped swamps to put to field. He then pays 2, and brings back the Reassembling Skeleton from the graveyard to the battlefield, and then passes through his phases. At the end of turn, he sacrifices the Reassembling Skeleton to the Braids trigger, which drains each of his opponents for 1 with the Bastion trigger. None of his opponents sacrifice a creature once more, so each take 2, and he draws 3 cards. Moving to his end of turn, I sacrifice my Arid Mesa, losing 1 to go and find a tapped Sacred Foundry, while Maxim decides what cards to keep in his hand as he discards down to 7. I play a tapped Temple of Triumph, doing my best Felix impression, and scry 1. I then cast a Soul Ring, and once that's resolved, tap enough for Dihada once more. I downtick my commander, revealing my top 4. I keep my Urborg as its legendary, and bin the rest, making 3 more treasures. With nothing else, I pass to Felix. Felix has a Reliquary Tower for his turn, and then pays 4 mana in his main phase for Zerium, Golden Wind. He pays the 1 as it enters to Cadric's ability, and makes a hasty token copy. Moving to combat, he gets to populate and makes a second token copy thanks to the Determined iteration. He then swings both of the tokens at Maxim for 6. They both connect, and this makes him 6 2/2 Griffin tokens. And at this point he also realizes that Yoshimaru should have more +1/+1 counters on it from seeing the legendary Griffins come in. Moving to his end step, he then sacrifices his 2 tokens and passes turn. Seb's first main phase has Wilhelt coming in, and he moves to combat once his commander resolves. He swings the Zombie Army at Maxim, who takes the hit. Moving to his end step, Wilhelt triggers, and Seb gets to sacrifice the Zombie Army token. This lets him draw a card from Wilhelt, and also makes him a 2/2 zombie token with Decayed. Maxim plays an Urborg as his land for turn, and then taps 5 in his main phase to bring out Sir Conrad. He then activates the skeleton in his yard, but with that ability on the stack, I respond. I sacrifice 3 treasure tokens to cast Kaya's Guile, picking the 2 modes as each opponent sacrificing a creature and then exiling their graveyards. This does trigger Sir Conrad a few times, but at least stops some of Maxim's value engine. He also sacrifices his commander, and with not much else he can do after it all resolves, Maxim passes to me. I draw for turn, and play the 3rd Urborg of the game. I then uptick Dihada, making the same deal with Felix again, but this time put the ability onto Cadric. I just pass after that. Felix draws, and plays a mountain. He taps 6 mana and decides to put Violence onto the stack as he moves to resolve Yosei the Morningstar. He pays the 1 to Cadric's trigger, putting a second copy that's a token into play. Yoshimaru keeps getting bigger with all these legendaries entering, and as he moves to combat, he makes a 3rd copy of Yosei, and Yoshimaru gets even bigger. Felix then swings Cadric and the Griffin tokens at Maxim, and the 2 token Yoseis at Seb. Maxim and Seb both take some big hits, and Felix makes even more Griffin tokens. He then moves to his end step, sacrificing the 2 Yoseis. The first one taps down Maxim's Sir Conrad and Bastion, and makes him skip his next untap step. While the second one targets me, tapping my Soul Ring and 4 lands, and makes me skip my next untap step. Seb gets to untap, which must feel nice, and plays a Command Tower for turn. He taps enough for a Tome Tyrant, another Zombie Lord. He then goes to combat, swinging the Gleaming Overseer at Felix, who blocks with Cadric and gains some life. With his combat step kinda doing the opposite of what he wanted, Seb then sacrifices the Overseer as he moves to his end step, drawing a card and making a Decayed Zombie token thanks to Wilhelt. Maxim skips his untap and draws. He He plays a Swamp for turn, and taps it for 1 black. He casts Defile, and targets the original Yosei to try and take it out. It resolves, and with Yosei dying, Felix has the On Death trigger make Maxim skip his next untap step again. At this point, Maxim also realizes there should have been a Sir Conrad trigger from Seb's turn as well as this turn, and we mark it down. With nothing else, he passes to me. My stuff stays tapped as well, and I draw for turn. I cast an Expedition map, which has Felix drawing from the Esper Sentinel, and I then crack it to go and find a land. It's Cabal Coffers for obvious reasons, which I play as my land for turn. I then downtick Dihada once again after I'm done shuffling, and reveal 4 non-legendary spells, making 4 more treasure tokens. With nothing else, I pass. Felix untaps, draws, and plays a Plains in his main phase. He looks around the table and feels pretty good about his chances as he tries to resolve an Aurelia. She sticks, and he pays the 1 to make a token copy with Cadric. And we then go around the table to see if anyone has a response. With unfortunately none to be found, this means Felix will be able to keep making Aurelia copies on his combat steps with a determined iteration, and then get extra combat steps from those Aurelias. This will gain him an unlimited amount of combat steps, and since Seb, Max, and I can't stop it, Felix wins the game. Game review time. So one thing that I learned with Dihada in this game was that I need to have other ways of getting stuff flashback, maybe like recoup. I lost a lot of board wipes that I couldn't really get back, and meant the only one that I could possibly hit with Dihada was Urza's Ruinous Blast. I'm still enjoying the change immensely, it's just food for thought. Maxim's Braids deck did exactly what he wants to do, which was cause some pain, although I think that losing his untap to Yosei was particularly backbreaking. Considering how much it slowed him down though, I'm pretty sure eating that reassembling skeleton was the right move, as it was providing him with an easy outlet to Braids, not to mention the Bastion draining us at the end of turn and gaining him 3 cards almost every turn of his. We saw a lot of lords coming from Seb's side of the board, and not too many tokens. I think he'd been hoping to draw into a board wipe, as his recovery was probably much better than ours, getting all those Decayed Zombie tokens when he had to wipe the board. I'm not entirely sure what to say about Cadric, other than I guess legendaries typically are very good, and getting 2 or 3 of them is even better. I could see how a deck like this could get out of hand very quickly, with 3 Elesh Norns being out, pumping your teams by +6/+6, while lowering all of your opponents by -6/-6 seems just nasty. And having Aurelia and Determined Iteration as a 2-card combo is pretty sweet to have in the back burner. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.